Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, we have the press preview for you. First look at what is on the front pages as they come into us here at Sky. But first, we've got some breaking news because the New Year honours list has just been announced. Former England football manager Gareth Southgate has been given a knighthood, and there are also knighthoods for actor Stephen Fry and London Mayor Sadiq Khan. Honours also go to the actor Sarah Lancashire and TV presenter Alan Titchmarsh. A host of Team GB athletes are also recognised, including runner Keely Hodgkinson. With this report, here is Alice Porter.
He was England's most successful manager in decades, rejuvenating the beautiful game for millions of fans. Now, Gareth Southgate is being knighted for his services. He's one of 1,200 people on the New Year's honours list, including Stephen Fry, knighted for his work on mental health awareness, having bravely spoken out about his own struggles with bipolar disorder. In the field of politics, Mayor for London Sadiq Khan has been knighted, and Labour MP Emily Thornberry, the former Shadow Attorney General, has become a dame.
It's a bit of a surprise, but I am delighted. I do think about both my grandmothers, my English grandmother and my Irish grandmother, and neither of whom were really even allowed to work once they got married. So what they would make of this, I really don't know.
Several. CBE recipients include actress Sarah Lancashire, who starred in the BBC series Happy Valley, and gardening presenter Alan Titchmarsh. In an Olympic year, it's no surprise that honours have gone to a host of Team GB athletes, including runner Keely Hodgkinson, who clinched gold in Paris in the 800 metres. But the New Year's honours list doesn't just celebrate celebrities and well-known figures. It also recognises ordinary people across the country who do extraordinary things every day. Outside a royal palace, some of those who've been honoured by the King gathered, including Michaela Beams. Aged 8, she founded a charity for children with brain cancer and continues to battle cancer herself. She's been awarded a BEM.
It was my mum that actually read it out to me due to my visual impairment. When she read it out, I couldn't believe it. It was like, is this real? And it took a while to sink in, but it's just crazy.
And as the year ends, recognition for some of those caught up in one of 2024's most defining stories, sub-postmasters who were wrongfully convicted in the Horizon IT scandal. For them, like so many others on this list, their work continues into 2025. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. It is our first look at what is on tomorrow's front pages, and tonight we'll be checking out the headlines with the ConservativeHome's deputy editor Henry Hill and the New Statesman's associate political editor Rachel Cunliffe. Great to see you both, and we shall chat in a moment after we've had a look at some of those front pages for you, beginning with the Eye, which says that while some victims of the post office scandal have been given New Year honours, they are still waiting for compensation. A reward for failure. That's on the front of the Mail as they lead on the London Mayor Sadiq Khan receiving a knighthood as part of those New Year honours. The front of the Times, however, says that teachers, nurses, civil servants as well could be offered higher wages, but in return for lower pensions. And the Star usually loves a zany story, but tonight even they are sceptical about claims that eating eggs can prevent baldness. And don't forget, just scan the QR code with your mobile. You can see it on screen now. Check out those front pages while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, I'm joined by Henry Hill and Rachel Cunliffe. So let's get cracking. Breaking news this evening. The New Year's honours list is out. And Gareth Southgate, according to the Times, scores in the New Year honours. He has been knighted after twice leading England to the brink of footballing glory, Rachel.
I think this was pretty inevitable when he announced over the summer that he would be resigning as England manager. He has got closer than anyone in recent memory at delivering those England football results that people have been watching for. When you get knighted, you get assigned an order, a knighthood order, and I think Gareth Southgate should go to the Order of Hope. Not quite getting it us there, but certainly...
The Order of Hope, I like that.
Order of Hope, yeah, I just made that up. Should we go with that?
It's quite a British thing, isn't it? The Order of Hope. Well done, you tried really hard.
We got us to finals, got us to two finals.
Founded by the Crusaders that never made it to Jerusalem.
Yeah, there's a nice picture on the front page there, raising his fist in the air. I mean, he did a good job, didn't he? He did do a good job.
Yeah, I mean, as Rachel said, he outperformed all of his predecessors going back to the 60s, which is a fairly good, in any job, that's a fairly good result. I mean, imagine what we'd have had to give him if we'd actually won. The Dukedom of Burgundy. Or,
Well, anything you wanted.
Well, yeah, absolutely, the crown.
House of Lords Minister for Sport, at the bare minimum.
Thane of Cawdor, king hereafter. But no, it's entirely fitting, right? Because sport is... It's not just about winning, right? Obviously, it's wonderful to win. It's great, lots of gold medalists and so on have won, but it is also just about performance. I mean, just say trying sounds a bit loserish, but they performed really well. And you can be a really good team and still lose because the other teams can also just be really good. Yeah. So I think he did a fantastic job, and it's inevitable and entirely fit.
And also, it's about his attitude and his personality and his management skills. I mean, he was loved by the team, wasn't he?
He was loved by the team. That attitude of sort of sportsmanship, I think, and also giving the nation moments that really brought us together, even if they didn't necessarily result in the trophies that people wanted. And, of course, making waistcoats cool again.
Of course.
Which I think deserves a mention and honour all on its own.
Let's talk about some of the others then who have been honoured inside the Times. And Stephen Fry. We were talking about Stephen Fry in the break, weren't we? Thinking, well, surely he's already been honoured. But he hasn't until now.
Well, and this is something that Stephen Fry himself has pondered about publicly. I would love to know what level of fame you have to get to before people start asking you, do you think it's a bit odd that you haven't received an honour yet? But obviously that's the level that Stephen Fry, national treasure, was at, and he had speculated that it might have been because some of the stuff that he'd written about or some of the stuff that happened when he was a teenager, and he sort of laughed it off, this idea that he hadn't got on it yet. But now he's going to be knighted not just for his acting, screenwriting, sort of general being the face of a particular facet of British society, but specifically for his work on mental health. And he's been chair of the mental health charity Mind, and just talking about his own struggles with mental health and helping to raise awareness, raise money, and to destigmatise some of those conditions.
Yeah, I quite like the quote here. The actor and screenwriter said he was startled and enchanted to be given the honour which came out of the blue. What other names on here, Henry, have stuck out for you?
Well, I mean, later on, the Daily Mail is very upset about Sadiq Khan.
Save it.
But we'll save it. But otherwise, the problem is that all of this comes from the world of sport. And as any time a sporting story comes up on any of these shows, I have to confess, I don't really follow it. I wish them all the best. I'm very glad when they win. I'm cheering for them in sort of the abstract. But there are lots of people here who've won gold medals and things, and I honestly could not tell you who they are.
Okay.
I'm very happy for them.
You know who Keely Hodgkinson is?
No.
No? You didn't watch her win gold?
I think she was in the thing a minute ago, but until then, I've got no idea.
Yeah, rower Helen Glover as well.
There she is,
honoured.
yeah.
Well, as soon as we've got the Mail up, why don't we talk about the Mail then, Henry? I mean, is this a fair headline?
Go on, Henry.
Okay, yes and no. On the one hand, Sadiq Khan has not been a particularly... And this isn't a particularly partisan point. He's not been a particularly effective mayor of London. If you look at the various metrics of London's nightlife, is absolutely tanking and all the rest of it. On the other hand, political honours and honours just always have different rules, right? And the Conservative Party gave honours to all kinds of people who you might think, does this really justify, you're a chief whip for a bit and you know a lot of secrets? Do you really justify a gong? To not naming any names. And so there are lots of ones like that. So, yeah, you can, on the face of it, say, what has Sadiq Khan done to distinguish himself in this office? But realistically, no one is in a position to throw stones on this issue. And it's harmless. I think it's fundamentally, he's not being given a seat in the legislature. He's not being given a public pension or any money. He's being given a title and a little bit of metal. Let it go.
I mean, I'll name the person that Henry was being too polite to name, which is we now have to refer to Sir Gavin Williamson. And I think that once that happened, any kind of rules about who was branded getting a reward for failure were kind of off the table. But I think the story is actually really quite tasteless, because in running so big on it's unacceptable that Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, who won 3 terms, and there are points about Sadiq Khan's record that you can say point to need for recognition. I mean, completely agree with Henry about London nightlife, but he has made London transport much more accessible. He's brought pollution down. There are wins that you can point to. Free school meals. There are things that you can point to. But in deciding to run with this, they have just squished at the bottom other people who have got honours. They made the story all about Sadiq Khan, and they haven't even mentioned the sub-postmasters and the campaigners in the Post Office Horizon scandal who were being recognised in this honours list with OBEs. They haven't had space for them. They haven't had space for anyone who does deserve an honour, even by the Mail standards, because they're too busy being upset that Sadiq Khan had got one. And I don't remember seeing a front page like this when Gavin Williamson got his.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a particularly pleasant front page, is it? A particularly pleasant headline saying that it risks overshadowing the New Year's honours. I think people tomorrow will be talking about Stephen Fry, won't they, and being delighted.
Yeah, or Jacqueline Wilson, who, written...
I love Jacqueline Wilson.
Exactly. I'm another one, frankly, now that I've seen her name, amazed that she hasn't been given something before now, given that she's been one of this country's foremost children's authors since I was young enough to be reading her books, which is a very long time ago.
Jacqueline Wilson was the author who got me, as a dyslexic schoolchild who hated reading, into books and into loving reading. And I think she has done that to so many children who struggled.
Right.
And her books, I still read her books now as an adult.
My headline would have been like, what on earth took so long for that to happen? I just assumed that she had one and didn't mention it. But yeah, it is often the case with news that we do focus on the negative story, the bad news, the attack lines and so on. There's a sort of cliche in the trade that the good news doesn't really trade all that well. But it's one or two stories a year when you get this, and there's so many things you can pick. I mean, look at this the Times spread. Look at just the pictures. There's so many things you can do to make this a positive story, and finding the negative angle and putting it on the front page as opposed to like an inside column it's a disappointing decision. Yeah,
a disappointing way perhaps to end the year and end what is a lot of happiness and joy for many people who have rightfully received an honour. Let's look at the front of the eye, Rachel. You mentioned the Post Office scandal victims then, and of course their struggle, their fight continues into 2025.
It does. They are still struggling to get compensation. The Post Office inquiry is still going on. You can watch it. You can watch it play out online. And I think it's interesting in the same way that we were talking about the decision that the Mail made to run with a negative story about Sadiq Khan. I think it's interesting and quite fitting, actually, that the Eye, which has been, along with many other papers really following the Post Office Horizon scandal, has chosen to give its front page to this and to the campaigners and some of the sub-postmasters who people might remember their names, some of the ones who were featured in last year's ITV drama, Mr Bates versus the Post Office, and also to one of the journalists who first got involved and broke the story and really tried to expose what was going on there. But the more you read about the Post Office scandal and the more you sit through the inquiry, and I have sat through many hours of the inquiry and the Select Committee on the topic, the more you see how incredibly complicated and twisted and convoluted it is. And every time I report on it and I watch it, there is something new. The last thing I watched, there was the current boss of Fujitsu, who provided the software, saying that he couldn't be certain that the software that they were using right now at this minute was accurate for accounting.
It was an amazing moment, that, wasn't it?
It was absolutely astounding. So I think this is going to run into 2025.
Yeah, quick thought, Henry?
No, I mean, I agree entirely with Rachel. This has been an absolutely extraordinary story to watch, especially as somebody who covers sort of public services in the more abstract and policy sense. Just the sheer... What I really want, and I've said this before, what I really want when all of this is over is I want an inside account from the perspective of the Post Office's management, because I just want to know what they were thinking when they doubled down and tripled down what something that could have been embarrassing but fixable, they turned into a national scandal because they decided it was more likely hundreds and hundreds of their staff had turned into thieves overnight than that the IT wasn't working. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, maybe we will find out next year. Thank you both for the moment. Coming up after the break, Sir Keir Starmer defends the government's plans to impose VAT on private schools. Discussing that and more next. Oh, welcome back. Part 2 of the press preview. Rachel and Henry are still with me in the studio. Let's go back to the Times. Rachel, plans to improve staff retention in the public sector.
This is a really fascinating story. So we know that salaries in the public sector over the last 15 years have sort of stagnated, and there have been lots of disputes with nurses, junior doctors, teachers, civil servants over pay. But we also know that people who work in the public sector get more generous pensions than those who work in the private sector. So this is an idea to have higher starting salaries or higher salaries for people going into the public sector now in exchange for them having lower pension contributions put in by the government. The idea being that if you are at a time in your life when you're trying to put together enough for a deposit or to get a mortgage, your salary now counts much more than, oh, well, I've got this pension pot that will be worth X amount in the future. And it would also save the government money because you could give them that money up front and have less of a pensions liability for the future, which would help with debt levels, which kind of sounds great, except that none of us, I think Henry would agree with me here, none of us are really saving enough. None of us who work in the private sector are saving as much as we need to for our retirements. There's a big, huge sort of crisis coming when people want to retire in their 60s and we're all living longer and longer and we don't have the savings to do it. And the only people who do have the savings to do it, or who will have the savings to do it, are those who are working in the public sector where the government or taxpayers, i.e. us, have been funding those pensions. So I can see the merits of this plan and I can see why it might appeal to a young teacher or a nurse starting out. But I also think that we need to talk more generally about how none of us are saving enough for retirement and it's all, our futures are going to be completely unfunded.
And interestingly, Henry, the unions seem sort of divided over whether this is a good idea or not.
Yeah, some of them have described it as divisive, which is a good indication that some of them like it. And as Rachel said, it tends to be the younger staffers, because at this point, the retirement age is going up and up and up. If you're a trainee teacher in their 20s, actually a higher salary now at a time when rent is about as high as it's ever been, mortgages are as expensive as ever, it means more, right? The trade-off is very different to when a previous generation of public sector workers were starting out. And it does make sense for the government because, as Rachel said, these are unfunded, public sector pensions are unfunded liabilities, right? There's no pot of money from which they're paid. They simply accrue as obligations to, say, the NHS. And they're often unfunded and unfundable and very worrying, especially on things like NHS and universities and so on. So it does make sense. The challenge for the government is going to be making this land, because pensions could potentially be very dangerous for them in this parliament. Because in 2027, Rachel Reeves has said that the pots from defined contribution pension schemes, that's private sector pension schemes, are going to be included in inheritance tax.
Right.
Which means that the one thing you get with a worse DC pension is a pot of money that you've paid into, which you can currently leave to people, which means hundreds of thousands of people with already not very impressive pensions are suddenly going to be dragged into inheritance tax, and public sector workers won't be affected because there's no pot. So there's real danger for the government in pensions, and trying to downplay that makes sense. OK. All right,
you can read more about that on the front of the Times. Let's talk about VAT on private schools, Rachel. Tomorrow, 20%, so that's on the 1st, a 20% levy on fees will take effect. Number 10 insisting it's the right thing to do for state schools. Well,
94% of children go to state schools is the point the government is making. And Keir Starmer's argument here is that if more middle-class parents are priced out of private education, their kids go into state schools, that's good for everyone because those parents will help drive up standards in those state schools, which is kind of already happening because private schools over the last couple of decades have massively increased their fees and are already pricing out many of the middle-class professionals that people in past generations would have been able to afford to send their children to private school. And the top private schools are, I think, overwhelmingly dominated with the children of very, very wealthy the parents from abroad. So already those middle-class parents are being priced out. This will not stop the accusations that Bridget Phillipson is involved in some kind of class war and that the VAT is very unfair. But I think that the point that he and Bridget Phillipson are really trying to hammer home is that it's about improving state education for the vast majority of children who are in those schools, not about punishing middle-class parents.
Henry's desperate to jump
Go
in.
on, Henry.
Go for it.
Go for it.
So there's a form of politics which is this isn't happening and it's good, which is where you simultaneously deny that something will happen and say that actually it would be a good thing. And in this case, the government is denying that there will be large numbers of pupils displaced from the private sector and that the inflow of pupils from the private sector into the state sector will drive up standards. Now, they both can't be true. The point on driving up standards is it's a fiction, because what this actually means is the way that we have state schools operate in this country, it's a postcode lottery. And we already see this. There is a vast world of difference between two schools which are legally the same type of school, depending on is it in a rich bit of the country or not. Being in the catchment area of a good school pushes up house prices. What this means is that some of the sharpest elbows in the country, if they leave the private sector, are about to join the fight for already oversubscribed schools in good catchment areas. That's not a general uplift. That doesn't mean it's better for your child. If you're a parent with a good oversubscribed school near you, with a private school that's under pressure, you'll have more competition.
Shouldn't we be bringing up those schools that aren't doing so well by encouraging parents who are enthusiastic and pushing their kids to go to them so that all standards right?
Well, you want to encourage very wealthy parents to buy houses near bad schools to improve them. I mean, they're not missionaries, and they're certainly not going to do it with their own children. If you raise the standards of the schools, the parents can follow, and the previous government did a lot of good work on that. And of course, it's always nice to be able to say, wouldn't it be best if all schools were nice? And it would. But if you're looking at the actual impact of this policy, if it displaces people, it's not going to displace people en masse. The government does not have the money to fund the extra 600,000 people, 600,000 pupils?
They're not all going to leave.
Right, but they're not all going to leave. I'm not saying that, but like, the private sector is useful. We have lots of stretched budgets in this country. Every pupil in a private school is one whose parents have paid the money to the education department, which gets spent on state schools, and then spends more of their own money educating their own child, right? That is a useful bit of weight to have being carried at the moment.
But they're also overwhelmingly the children of parents who have weathered fee increases of, the article there says, 75% in real terms since 2000 and are probably going to be able to...
So it isn't going to drive up standards?
No, I don't think it's going to drive up standards.
Right.
I didn't say it was. Keir Starmer did. I don't think it's going to make any difference at all.
Listen, both, it's been great chatting to you. And what's the best thing about you talking so much about VAT on private schools is that we don't have time to talk about this in the Daily Star. Eggheads, we've cracked baldness, because I was rather worried about how I was going to approach that subject, Henry. Thank you very much. We shall speak again a bit later. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, a rise Sir Stephen Fry is among those knighted in the New Year's Honours list. The full story, top of the hour.